All right. Well, it is 11:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. We have quite a lot to cover in just a short amount of time. So thank you again for everyone who's joined today for our webinar where we'll be talking about the silver linings of COVID. So as we jump in and get started here today, I do want to really just welcome a few of our special guests who will be supporting us during this webinar. The two guests I want to acknowledge here are one, Patrick Miles of United Way of Greater Chattanooga. He's joining us, and he will be the subject of all of the questions that I'll be asking. We'll be going back and forth and having a good conversation as we go through. The other special guest that I want to acknowledge is Esther Hart. She will be doing a live graphic recording capture of our conversation today. So she will be scribing away and creating this beautiful representation of our conversation so we can be able to reflect on and really talk to later as we see what we learned and discussed during our brief conversation here. So with that, really, like I said, the goal for today, we're going to jump right in. Patrick and I will be having a nice conversation where we'll be exploring the impact of COVID-19. And what we'll do is we'll actually have Esther, she'll be sharing her screen, which will allow us to be able to see as Patrick and I are talking and really see what she can be able to capture as well. And then we'll finish on a sort of what's next after we discuss the impact. So with that, I'm going to see if we can get Esther's screen up on, and then we'll go ahead and get started with Patrick here.
It's a pleasure to join you, Collin, and thank you so much for hosting this. I think you all are in for a treat as far as watching Esther draw live as we talk. It's pretty amazing how she's done this. I've been in a couple sessions with her. I want to say up front, look, that we're talking about the silver linings around this COVID, but we do have to recognize before we really jump into all the unexpected benefits out of this, to recognize that this is a really impactful crisis that we're dealing with. There are a lot of people across the globe, and really even right here in our community, who are suffering, who are going through some really tough, hard times. So today, we are going to talk about some of the good that we're seeing come out of that, out of the response around some of this. But I think it's wise of us to always just remember that there also are people that are still struggling, and keeping them in mind as we're talking.
Yeah, that's a great point, Patrick. That really kind of takes us to our first conversation topic here. We've been looking at quite a bit of research that's being done, particularly about the impact of COVID-19 and how it's really affected not just businesses, but the social sector, individuals, communities. It's really across the board has impacted a lot of different people, and really no one has come away unscathed, right? And so through this, we're seeing this really strong shift in how organizations really must work to sort of rebuild in this situation. The response and how to react to this crisis, right? So one of the things that we're seeing a lot is this process where organizations have actually taken an opportunity to reassure their customers or their clients, their constituents, whoever that may be, to ensure that they feel confident that that they're there for them, that things are stable, that they can have that sense of stability and safety. I was wondering, could you share some of the ways that you've seen, at least in this community, organizations kind of reinforce confidence for their constituents?
Yes, for sure. So for those of you who know, at United Way, we've been helping to sort of convene and coordinate sort of a collective effort around our response to the social sector impact that the COVID crisis has caused in our region. I would say, the amazing stories that we're hearing around the resilience of not only our social sector organizations, but also the people who they serve. It's been quite amazing to see sort of some unique ways that they're still trying to reach out show that they're still thinking about their clients, things like that. And some of you are aware of some of these things as well. So, for example, teachers from our schools who are driving by the neighborhoods and have signs out, or who literally are doing one-on-one teaching lessons and tutoring lessons across a glass front door, things like that. The elderly, there are lots of elderly people in our community who are just really trepid about leaving their homes. So some of the elder service, senior adult, older adult, senior organizations, serving organizations are trying to be creative as well to show them that, hey, you can still be confident during this time. So they are also going by and doing workouts with people in senior home facilities from a distance, through windows or from balconies. You have lots of people who are organizing little ways to even bring arts to those communities by mobilizing artists and musicians to go play some music to senior facilities. So it's things like that I think that you're starting to see also, just a way for confidence building just in a little bit, that they're still being considered and heard from.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. One of the things that that we're seeing as well, kind of in a more broader sort of corporate setting, some organizations that have really taken on this effort of reassuring. We actually saw kind of a distinction between organizations like Burger King, that we might know very well, as well as McDonald's, right? So when we look at the ways that they have engaged and supported their customers, we actually see a couple of sort of varied responses. You know, you have an organization like Burger King that has been very forward in their communication of saying, we are here for you. Not only that, we're giving away, free Whopper for your kid to be able to engage with them, or, food for the frontline workers. How do we really kind of step in and really taking on this sort of responsibility that's above and beyond what is normally expected of an organization. And then even from the other side, McDonald's, their response has been more of like, we want to not overwhelm you with information. And so they've actually taken the different approach of not being as active in that engagement, but being able to acknowledge and really kind of just echo sort of the communication of a whole. The other thing that we're seeing a lot is how organizations are using tools specifically around what you might call strategic foresight. So this ability to be able to say, okay, we know things are changing. We know that there's a lot of situation here, but hey, we're actively thinking about not just what's going on right now and how do we tactically respond to these situations, but how do we look at different horizons of, if things happen this way, or if situations change politically or legally, or even just economically, as different things shift in our country or in other countries as well. So those are things that we're seeing a lot from kind of the corporate sector. I do want to take a moment, I mentioned talking about chat. If you guys have seen some opportunities or some activities that organizations have done to really reassure their customers, I'd love for you to be able to use the chat and just type that in and share that with us here, so Patrick and I can see that, and also so Esther can be able to capture that into here as well. So if you have seen an example that you want to share of an organization that has really taken on this challenge of rebuilding confidence, whether that's with them as an organization or within the community. Yeah, I see here one that just came in. Walmart is now introducing a mask requirement for employees and customers to be able to really be mindful of the situation and being able to take care of that. That's really great. Yes, lots of schools, even Hamilton County specifically, is using 3D printers to print the PPE for local healthcare providers. That's another great example here. Patrick, I want to kind of take a step into another area that we've seen a lot during this time, and everyone's really familiar with this, and it's become more commonplace now, but there's definitely been a sort of rapid adoption of technology. You know, the ability to be able to connect in and shorten that distance between individuals has been around for quite a while now, but we're seeing almost this just absolute necessity. I was wondering if you could talk about how you've seen sort of this virtual world really develop in your line of work and the things that you guys have been doing.
Right. I think everyone knows the words Zoom now. It's pretty much in everyone's vocabulary. Um, I would say, for the social sector across the greater Chattanooga community, we have notoriously been a little bit behind the game when it comes to the use of technology, especially in communication. Well, leave it up to a crisis to force all of us to begin to really start interacting and talking and using technology in a much more efficient way, right? To drive our organization's impact. So right off the bat, while our team at United Way have already been using some of that in the background, and more specifically, our social innovation venture forward team really even trying to test and adopt that and what it might look like for others to potentially to do that as well and to train others. I think the crisis right away, it led people to go, how can we quickly organize ourselves and be able to communicate rapidly together? And how can we take some of our existing services and be able to still provide those to our constituents and clients in our communities? And so it was just this rapid understanding of like, what is Zoom? What are all these features that allow you to interact and engage? But then are there other software, internet, virtual tools that would allow us to conduct our services and our business structure? So there's some idea sharing software systems called like Miro or Mural. We, along with Collin and the Bridge team, utilize a design thinking platform called Sprintbase, which we love. It's just a really great way to kind of to see people engage across idea sharing and the whole process of design thinking, of empathy building, and be able to do that online and virtually. There have been some hurdles around that, especially for people who are not quite used to, they don't have the knowledge or they don't have the comfort of using internet-based technology. But for the most part, you've seen people forced to have to jump into those things. So Slack, Airtable, Trello, all of these are different platforms that our groups have been using constantly.
Yeah, that's great. It's really cool to see just kind of that reaction and how do we build this new skill and take that in and seeing that happen. One of the other things that's been really exciting to be able to see, even in our local area too, as we think about what goes alongside all of this Zooming and virtual connection is connectivity, right? So being able to connect to the internet, one of the things that has been really encouraging that we've seen, organizations like Thrive Regional Partnership has been advocating for connectivity in our 16 county region for years now. And we see that kind of push, and as much as that has been brought to the attention, a situation such as what we're in right now created this opportunity for an organization here at EPB to be able to go and put these hotspots in connectivity locations to be able to really plug in and provide that internet access. And then even in a county nearby here in Catoosa County, where EPB doesn't have a footprint, the school system said we're going to provide hotspots, Verizon hotspots, to all the students who don't have access. So the response to be able to kind of continue to push forward and recognize that this has to be the way we work. And so what are the things that we can do immediately to be able to address those situations?
Yeah, I would say even like the ND Innovation Center has taken a huge role in leading at least our region's efforts at trying to get people to adopt digital access. How can we bring hotspots to the rural communities that really don't have a whole lot of them? We saw a rapid element that EPB was looking at putting towers up in places that they didn't really have before, or that wasn't on their footprint. Mm-hmm. So I think you're starting to see not just the sort of the nonprofits who live in that space try to provide for their community, but you're starting to also see, like as you just said, some of the for-profit companies who are sort of walking alongside and saying, we want to do whatever we can to also help with the connectivity issues and be able to provide a service, and because they know that the bridge to these online services is the use of these technologies, and you need to have the infrastructure built. And so it's been really great to see some of these companies build the infrastructure rapidly.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the other things that you mentioned I want to touch on really quickly is the sort of discomfort, right, with adjusting to, there's a necessity of reacting to building this sort of capability with technology, but there's also discomfort. So I was wondering if you could talk to maybe some of the activities that you've seen where organizations have kind of provided those sort of responses, maybe even, mental health or sanity checks during this time.
Sure. So some of the ways I think people are adopting this technology a little bit are doing things like, at a lot of faith-based, organizations or churches and centers are utilizing these webinar-based platforms like we're using right now to conduct their small groups, to still have prayer meetings. We've had people actually use things like this and have a jazz concert as a happy hour. Of course, some of you guys have probably seen John, I think it's Krasinski's from The Office, I think that's how you say his last name, his Some Good News episodes on YouTube. All of that are helping with some of the mental health capacities that it's just not crisis, but that we can also share lots of good as well. I mentioned in the chat as well, the use of Zoom for even youth soccer and other sports. You're starting to see people come up with really creative and unique ways to sort of draw out the fact that, yes, we know that we're in this place where we can't play in our normal way, but hey, let's challenge one another to be creative in the way that we are, the way that we can continue to play sports or continue to practice our music or whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's really great. One of the other things that we've seen a lot is different companies that have taken this opportunity. You mentioned John Krasinski as providing that sort of, the good news types of things. You have CEOs of companies like Southwest Airlines who are putting his thoughts and comments right in front of his employees, even on a daily basis, of just being able to say, I know that this is creating significant change for you guys, but I'm going to tell you what's going on, and being able to be transparent in that communication. And that actually takes me to kind of our next conversation topic here. One of the things that you had talked about before, some of the efforts of organizing this sort of cross-sector collaboration and being able to support all these organizations within this region in particular. I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about how you've seen that transparent communication really build momentum in the region.
Yes, I would say, so this is the area that we're so excited about, the way that our region has responded around this crisis. We're not New York State, and we're not dealing with significant loss of life as compared to some other hot spots, quote unquote. But I think some of that has to do with the fact of how our organizations, both for-profit, nonprofit, faith-based, you name it, have rapidly come together to try to help one another to deal with this. The different issues that are arising, especially across the social sector, is really significant. So right away, there was this rapid need to start communicating. And we have some really good partners who sort of helped to organize those efforts right away. There's this new organization called We Over Me that's really taken really a hold on and helping to drive some of this. That sort of initiated the conversation, and United Way got in there because that's sort of our bread and butter, is to kind of convene. So one of the things that we have seen out of this is just this fantastic transparency, where you saw lots of work being operated in traditional silos. So a lot of people who maybe potentially work with the Latino community or the immigrant community, maybe there's a little bit of competition between some of them. Well, instantly you saw through this crisis, hey, we can't do this anymore. We have to be able to work together. So there are all these different partners who oftentimes are fighting for the same dollars from foundations, who are now saying, wait a minute, let's collectively come together. These are our strengths. These might be their strengths. How can we use our strengths together to actually provide immediate response to this? And the way that those things are happening is just by offering space for people to be transparent, to be honest, and to actually communicate with one another. So we're doing initially at the onslaught of the crisis, we had daily check-in calls with we probably have about 180 to almost 200 people on these check-in calls, just listening in and offering feedback around common needs and issues, and then providing opportunities to allow people to share potential solutions. So just that immediate innovation and problem-solving effort across barriers was wonderful. And then over time, we saw this aspect of, hey, wait a minute, we should really kind of focus our efforts around certain populations of need. So then maybe there's, the Latinas I mentioned, or the elderly adults, or we even started to consider, because we heard about even the disabled community, the community like the deaf community, who, a lot of people were overlooking as far as communication. Like we're talking about information sharing in Spanish, but we're not necessarily coming up with different creative ways to address those who are deaf or those who are blind. So we started to organize lots of focus groups, and that also produced a little bit more actionable items and processes and work. So rather than just talking about ideas, it's like taking these needs to, addressing who's going to take that need and then carry it forward to actual solution. And that has been well received by almost everybody. One of the big things we've heard really is that the desire that they hope this maintains this even after COVID. They're hoping that this form of cross-sector collaborative effort around common areas of interest can be carried forward. And I think that's exciting to hear.
Yeah, that's a great, we saw a question come in that was actually one of my upcoming questions as well of, with all of this momentum that we're seeing in here, I think there's probably the open question of, how do we continue to maintain this impact that we've seen to address these sort of hot topics as, even once we're past a crisis such as what we're in right now.
I'll speak to that. We were in a session at one point in time talking about social impact. So when you do collective social impact around a community that you're thinking of, so you're thinking of the people in need, right? And as long as our focus is on those people and not on ourselves and not on our organizations, then I think that that's the right frame of mind to start delivering on solutions. But then I remember in this session where we had multiple community agencies, one person basically rose and they said, listen, I think that for us to really have deep level impact and carry forward this collaboration, we're going to have to put our own brands, labels, and logos aside and think about how, not our own logo, not our own organizations, how do we build our own capacity for our own efforts, stop looking at me, but how can we focus on them, the people that we're trying to rapidly serve in the first place. So I think that is probably the biggest key that we heard was trying to be others focused.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even kind of a segue into one of the last sort of topic areas that I was wanting us to kind of talk about here. And this is really like the opportunity to share sort of the best practices that we're seeing. Lots of organizations have found ways to be able to serve, provide, meet needs, whether they're for-profit, nonprofit, government. How have you guys been able to see some of this best practice sharing in the past few months?
I'm going to hit on one example just because I know we're running out of time, but probably the really unique example that just emerged recently and even was shared on a task force check-in call this morning is that our local YMCA has some teen serving organizations that are, services and programs that are led by teenagers for teenagers in our own community. Well, in the midst of this crisis, and they have these online webinar-based platforms to utilize, some of these teens came up with this new creative way to actually say, hey, I want to know how other teenagers across the globe are also dealing with this. And lo and behold, local teenagers from Chattanooga created now this global student exchange forum using online capabilities and software systems, where they are now leading and guiding conversation with other teenagers across the world about how COVID is impacting them. So it's been amazing to see just little things like that. It's a great best practice to again, think about other people, think about the resources that we have in front of us, and how might we be able to use those things collectively to even broaden our scope and our scale.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. One of the things that we're thinking about, and you spoke to it a little while ago, is seeing organizations or even sort of constituents or participants taking bold actions to connect not just people to the products or services that are there, but with other people as well. Makes me think about an example that we saw a little while back for an organization called Expensify, and their whole premise is really around basically just tracking your expenses, right, as in a corporate setting or even personally, right? So that's a engagement of a product to an individual or a person. But right at the beginning of this crisis, one of the things that they announced, coming straight from their top, that they wanted to be able to integrate with the SNAP program for introducing reimbursement to individuals who are part of that program. So they connected their service or their product that they have to not just enable individuals who are using sort of that SNAP card to be able to get some additional reimbursement, but it also was presented to other individuals who use Expensify who weren't necessarily utilizing that particular program right there, and to be able to then directly give to be able to support that as well. So it was really connecting, using the product or service that they had to connect people to people, and that was really a great way to build some energy around there. I know we're really wrapping up on time, so one of the things that I wanted to do is, we have a chance. Esther's been feverishly working away, and we can see all of the great stuff that she's captured in this conversation. I do want to kind of transition us. We've heard about all of these really great things that are happening in this community, that organizations really around the globe that are trying to do to be able to address these situations. And so when we think about that, really we're creating something new. We're building something, really this sort of new normal. So one of the things that it makes me think of is actually this quote that Mary's putting up here. It's from Simon Sinek. He's a leadership guru. We love talking about Simon Sinek, but he talks about like companies that thrive aren't focused on getting back to normal, but how to create a new normal. So when we think about all the things that are happening, all of the impact sort of that we're feeling across, whether it's connection, technology, where we live, how we live, any of that thing, those things that may be affecting us, the opportunity that is in front of us is what will we be? So we wanted to kind of present this as a close for us to really take some time to even just reflecting on some of the things that we talked about here, right? That the practices these organizations have been doing are being good listeners, right? So they're really looking for those revealing customer insights. So now more than ever, we should be listening and mapping our customers' needs, pain points, and wants, and those activities there. We're also seeing flexibility, right? So some of the examples we didn't get to cover that you had mentioned before, Patrick, were how organizations tried something, whether it was maybe food delivery on buses, and then they did it for the first few days and realized food was spoiling. So we have to change the way we do it. So the ability to be flexible in how you roll out an idea and adapt is something that we're seeing a lot. We talked a lot about learning from others. So sharing those best practices and surfacing those organic innovations is really a great way to kind of move forward. And the last thing we mentioned was how to be bold, right? So to look for opportunities to lean in rather than just holding on. So all of these things really remind us a lot of how these tactics are really simple, but they're basic, really design methods in a lot of the work that we see as well. So we're, in reflecting on everything that we've heard today, just excited to see what will continue to come out as we move forward. So I know we're at the top of the hour, so I do want to thank everyone for joining us here. Thank you to Patrick for your great insight that you shared, and of course, thank you to Esther for the graphic recording that she conducted here. We'll be sharing that out for the community to be able to see. It's just an encouragement as we go forward from here. So with that, thank you all for joining us, and hope you have a great rest of your day and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you all.